of a Jewish faith at heart. There's no doubt about that. And Christianity would have been a subsect, and then, of course, sort of many centuries later, the Islamic beliefs as well. So certainly, in terms of the Older Testament, you to look up Wikipedia and look up the Judeo-Christian beliefs, and you can see we've almost picked which books to run with and which books not to. So there's a commonality of books in the Old Testament that are shared across all the religions. There's something, let's say, like 100 books to choose from, and Judea's beliefs have as many as, I think, about sort of 40. We're closer to 20, but they're all the same sort of books that we pride as our own, But actually, in terms of saints from other religions, I have another sort of interesting story, but I don't want to be hogging air time that we're maybe supposed to be talking about.
To you.
Oh, are you?
Yes, Deborah's going to come back. Deborah's going to come back again.
Okay, well, this is a very interesting one. Have you ever heard of Eddie Irvine? He was like, a Formula One driver that raced for Ferrari.
I haven't, no.
Yeah, well, I was over in Indianapolis, certainly, on many occasions, 2005 on, and I would know Eddie fairly well, and would know his family fairly well. And Eddie started off racing before he raced with Jordan, and before that he raced in Japan. And the first sponsor he ever had was from a Christian ex-Lord Mayor of Belfast called Ian Adamson. Now, Ian is a well-known paediatrician as well. And it would be a friend of mine, let's say. And he was writing books on the Protestant religion in Northern Ireland. And it's funny, all the saints that we have in Catholicism, see them as, they're not really Catholic saints, they're actually Protestant saints. It's just that, the two religions split at the time of the Reformation, but every, sort of person was there before that. So all the saints, would say, of Columbanus and the ones that lived in Northumbria and Ina as really Presbyterian saints, not Catholic saints. And that's fine. That's an attitude of mind, and we'd laugh at that, but, sort of wanted to write this book, and he was going down to Assisi, sort of in Italy, and he wanted to get in because there was almost like an equivalent of the Book of Kells that was there. So when he went down, he had some sort of falling out with the guy at the door, and the guy said you couldn't come in to see it because I just don't want you to come in. So he wrote a letter of protest to this church, and they sent him back a letter saying that he couldn't enter because he wasn't a graduate of the college. So he wrote back to them and said, okay, well, who is a graduate of the college? And this was the time that Northern Ireland was in the middle of religious turmoil, and the only person that sort of was Cardinal O'Fee, Thomas O'Fee, who's dead. So he told me this story where he went and approached Thomas O'Fee, and the two of them got on a plane, flew to Italy. If you can imagine, they're from two different sides of the religious persuasions altogether. Sam would be an Ulster Unionist mayor of Belfast, and Thomas O'Fee would have been an Irish Catholic cardinal. So they'd have been going, without anybody knowing they were together if it got into the paper. So they went down to, it was either Astoria or Assisi. It could have been Astoria. And when they arrived, the little guy was still at the door. But you'd only let Thomas O'Fee in. And, Sam was saying, well, sure, Thomas doesn't know what to look at for in the books. And Thomas was saying, well, I'll look in the books and tell me what you want. And he says, well, I'll not know till I read it, because I've been following St. Columbanus' story. He went from Ireland to Scotland, and then he lived on the Isle of Ireland for, 3 or 4 years. Then he was in Northumbria. Then he went down to Switzerland, and then he went down to Italy, and I've been following, I'm writing a book on him, and I'll not know, the content until I read it. So anyway, Thomas said, well, so there's no point in me going in. I don't know what I'm looking for. So the two of them headed back to Belfast. And many years later, we're sitting in a restaurant, and Eddie Irvine is now with, sort of Ferrari. He's down in Milan, and his parents are going down to Lake Garda or Lake Como for a holiday. Well, when you're there, why don't you go and see is that little bee still at the door 15 years later? And so, sure enough, Edmund and Kathleen, his mother and father, went over to the little, sort of church where this special book was. And we all met them back in Dublin, and said, well, tell me, was that guy still there? And Edmund says, oh, he was there exactly, sort of as you described him, except he's got a little, sort of older, and he's got white hair now and all the rest. And what is the story? He says when he heard who it was, that it was Eddie Irvine's, because Eddie would be really big. He'd be, sort of very famous in Europe as a racing driver, or maybe even throughout the world, with Formula One. When I heard who he was, he turned around and he said to me, You know, we have a book in here, and there's crowds of people come down from Ireland all the time that are really interested in it. I'm not sure what they're looking for, but I'll tell you what, because you're Eddie's father and mother, do you want to come in and have a look at it yourselves? So they brought him in and showed him the book. It's funny. That also shows the commonality of religions when you go back to the stem etiology. We all have the same saints and all the same